All right.
Okay, welcome everybody. I welcome our members and our guests. I am Kim Scheintel. I'm president of the Jewish Genealogical Society of Southwest Florida. I thank Jim Haberman for helping with the Zoom setup. And this will be available on the JGS, the Southwest Florida website, along with other past presentations, unless the speaker requested to not have the presentations on the website. I'm going to ask Jim to now mute all the attendees, but you will be able to unmute yourself. Please.
Kim, you need to unmute.
Okay, all attendees are now muted. You'll be able to unmute yourself. Please put your questions in the chat and there will be a short Q&A following each presentation. We will hold all general questions to the end. And I just wanted to let you know, it's very good to see so many guests here today. And I'd just like to take a minute to tell you about the Jewish Genealogical Society of Southwest Florida. This group was formed in 1996. That's 26 years ago. We have 41 members. We have a website, a Facebook page, and a surname place database. And Leah Cook is ready to put it up on the website with an updated version. So we're really excited for all the hard work that Leah Cook put into working on that. The JGS of Southwest Florida is part of the IAJGS, which is an umbrella to over 90 Jewish genealogical societies around the world. If you would like to join the JGS of Southwest Florida, dues are $25 for a single membership for a year, $30 for a family membership, and $50 for a sustaining membership. For applications, you can go to our website. Now I would like to introduce to you Howard Finkel, the JGS of Southwest Florida Program Chair, to tell you about the exciting programs that we have planned for the remainder of the season and introduce our 5 speakers, and he will lead today's program. So now it's time for Howard to unmute himself.
I did. Thank you, Kim, and welcome everyone. Unfortunately, our plans to have today's meeting in person had to be changed due to concerns about COVID Omicron. So here we are meeting virtually again, and our programs for the remaining 2022 season will also be virtual. On Sunday, February 20th, our presenter will be Emily Garber, and her program is entitled, "It's What They Answered to, Understanding Ashkenazi Jewish Names." For March and April, we have a 2-parter on DNA. Our speaker for both meetings will be Gil Bardage. On March 20, his program is entitled, "Help, I Got My DNA Results and I'm Confused." And on April 17, his program is entitled, "Help, I Got My DNA Results. What are the next steps?" Okay, on to today. When we surveyed our membership last summer regarding the topics you wanted us to program, a significant number requested presentations and assistance on research methods and on specific geographic locations. Responding to that request today, 5 members of our society will share their expertise on doing research in the following areas: general research methods by Leah Cook, Poland by Douglas Cohen, Lithuania by Barry Halpern, Ukraine, Galicia by Mike Schwartz, and Bessarabia, Moldova by Yefim Kogan. Each presenter will speak for about 10 minutes. There will be a short Q&A following each presentation with a general Q&A at the end. We will begin with Leah Cook on general research methods. Leah is a local Southwest Florida resident. She has been doing genealogical research since 2001. Before retiring to Florida, she taught computer science and mathematics at schools and colleges in New England, mostly at Tufts University. She has a BA degree from the University of Wisconsin and an educational doctorate degree from University of Massachusetts. She manages the surname database and Facebook page for our society. She is also a member of JGS of Greater Boston. She has made numerous genealogy presentations and publications over the past 20 years. In discovering her family roots, Leah has been blessed with many miracles, often through DNA matches. She loves helping others uncover their roots and solving their genealogical mysteries. Leah, you're on.
Okay, I'm going to be doing a presentation from my screen. And so I would like to switch over to that now. So give me a moment. Okay, I hope you are seeing my screen that says Genealogy Research Methods, my introductory screen. Well, good afternoon. Today I'm going to talk about very specific genealogical research methods. I'm going to talk about mainly Ancestry.com and how you can use hints on Ancestry.com to locate marriage records, death records, and obituaries. And the hints I'm going to show are to find a grave, to historical newspapers, and also a marriage record. So a little bit dismal, obituaries, but they're one of the best sources of finding family members. And that is what I'm going to be showing you today. First, I want to thank Gil Bardage. Gil is going to be our speaker here in March and April. But on December 29th, I went to a webinar with Gil that was on Jewish Gen, and it was called Help I Tested My DNA and I Am Confused. And that will be our seminar here in March. He presented a method based on what is called longest DNA segment. It is a method to find distant relatives, those with whom you may not share a whole lot of DNA. But you're sharing some segments of DNA that are large segments. And in his presentation, he talked about large segments over 20 centimorgans. And you can ask him all about what a centimorgan is when he does the presentation. But I'm mentioning this because he got me started on a particular family track. Before I used the longest DNA segment method to discover family, I had a left-hand branch of my tree that had the name Buchholz in it. I didn't really know a whole lot about these people. I'm on the right-hand side, daughter of Maxwell Hutton. I'm pointing to Maxwell Hutton. And then my grandmother is Miriam Kaplan, and my great-grandfather, he's known Nachman Kaplan or Nathan Kaplan, and he had another daughter, Fanny, one of 12 children. And Fanny married Louis Willer, had a daughter named Ruth who married Leon, and they had a son named Gary, and they had another son who I will talk about a little later. Anyhow, using this method to discover distant cousins, I found probably 8 to 10 distant cousins, but only one had a surname that was in my family tree, and that surname is Buchholz. And this is a MyHeritage DNA matchup with Buchholz, and it says that I can contact Scott to find out about Buchholz. And Scott was actually a father-in-law to the person who I matched with. So, question is, how is this person related to me? I'd never heard of her before. I did contact Scott, found out that he was the father-in-law, but he referred me to someone else, who I took a while to get to actually connect with. And we did finally connect, and I actually spoke to him this morning just to make sure he was okay with my presentation, that I didn't reveal too much private information. So besides contacting and speaking to a Buchholz family member, I also used what are called hints in Ancestry.com. And the hints, if you're looking at a family tree in Ancestry.com, the hint is the small green icon, leaf, actually, in the upper right-hand corner of a person's name. And if you click on that, you will get a page that kind of looks like what I have here on the lower part of the slide. This is a link that says this person can be found in usnewspapers.com obituary index. And if I want to see that particular hint, I would click review. Now, the hint is for Ruth, Fanny Kaplan's daughter, and her spouse. And I'm going to come back to Leon's obituary a little later on. Today, not yesterday, there was a new leaf on Ancestry.com that looks like the one on the left part of my screen. That was not there Friday when I was finishing preparing this presentation. All right, but a hint in Ancestry.com goes to a record collection. And a lot of you may use census data, Social Security records, immigration and ship records, birth, marriage, death records. You may look at passports. You may look at naturalization. You may look at military records. Specifically today, I'm only going to show 3 different kinds of links. So marriage records, obituaries and newspaper.com, and find a grave. I want to mention that the longer your tree is on Ancestry, the more hints you're going to receive. My family tree has been on Ancestry since 2002, so I get a lot of hints. All right, here's a hint to a county marriage record. And on the left-hand side are some names from the record. On the right-hand side are names in my family tree, which you can see look a little bit different than the names on the left-hand side. If I didn't have quick compare showing, I wouldn't see my tree versus the record. I would just see what's in the record. I, of course, found this record very interesting because I am from Schenectady, New York. And so I found out that this marriage to Fanny Kaplan, my great aunt, took place in Schenectady, New York. Most of my family is from Springfield on my father's side, but my father was in Schenectady and so was Fanny. After I clicked on that particular hint, on the right-hand side of my Ancestry.com, I got a pop-up window that looks like what you're seeing here on the right-hand side. And you may notice that there is, and I hope you can see where I'm pointing, there is a little picture of a record. And I thought, okay, let's see what that record looks like. And when I go to that record, this is an actual marriage record for my great aunt Fanny Kaplan. Her father, Nathan, I should have said great-grandfather and step-great-grandmother. My great-grandfather had a number of wives. And I am not blood related to everybody, but some of the people came from a different wife. We all have the same great-grandfather though. But here I found out the name of Fanny's husband, Lewis Willard, and I found out the name of his parents. And they're here on the left-hand side, whereas my family is here on the right-hand side. Another link from Lewis Willard brought me to Find a Grave. And here in Find a Grave, I see actually Lewis Willard's headstone. What was interesting about this, if I read Hebrew, I could see the name of Lewis Willard's parents, but I don't. I guess I could put it into translation in Google and get what the translation is. But I would have to type in Hebrew, which you can do. But on the bottom of the screen are some family members. There's Fanny Kaplan Willard. She's my great aunt, and then Pauline Steinman, who happens to be Fanny and Lewis Willard's daughter. I knew her during her lifetime. All right, earlier I showed a link to an obituary, and this is a link to newspapers.com. You do need to have a subscription to newspapers.com to see an actual obituary. Without a subscription, you would just see the hint and some of the record information. I do want to mention that it is not inexpensive to have a newspapers.com subscription. And also, there are different kinds of subscriptions in newspapers.com. And you need the deluxe subscription, the more expensive one, to actually see this kind of information and have it linked to Ancestry. I think you can see in the slide where it says Save to Ancestry. And you also can clip things and save all the clippings in newspapers.com. What I learned in this particular obituary was that after my cousin Ruth died, that her husband Leon remarried. And I also found out that there is a son named Bob, and he was not in my family tree. So Bob was a new family member to me. Another Ancestry.com hint brought me to a wedding announcement for Elliot, my cousin who I spoke with this morning. And this again was newspapers.com. And again, from this particular link or hint, I found out his wife's first name and last name. So I was able to also locate some of her family members. Another obituary was Leon Buchholz's son, Gary. And I found out from this link that Gary had another son named Lonnie, who I also didn't have in my family tree. The hint also shows the names of wives. Now, this is all public information because these are all in newspapers that have been printed. From this hint, I got the approximate, I got that Gary Buchholz came from Fords, New Jersey. He died when he was 69. I had the date of the newspaper, so I knew when he was born from this hint. Ancestry links very nicely with newspapers.com, but newspapers.com is costly. There is another site called Fulton History, which has other newspapers, mainly for small towns and small cities, but it's free. And if you go to fultonhistory.com, you will see this, you will see a link called Go and Search My Archives, and that brings up the search page. I found actually 29 searches for myself, and I was a little surprised. One of them was a newspaper actually in Greenfield, Massachusetts, that had picked up something that I had done later on in my career. I want to summarize now. Before doing the research with newspapers and Find a Grave, I had 3 Buchholz family members in my tree and no information about them. After doing the research, again with Find a Grave and newspapers.com, I was able to add birth and death dates to my relatives. I also was able to add more than 10 new members to my family tree. So that was exciting. Before I leave, I want to mention that there's a really neat tool on Ancestry.com called Throughline. If you have DNA on Ancestry.com and you have a family tree, and someone else has DNA on Ancestry.com and they have a family tree, you will get Throughline. And on Throughline, you can see your matches here, your DNA matches on the bottom, and it's showing who they believe the matches are from. And that is an extremely useful tool. So I want to summarize saying I showed a number of tools for doing research. I hope that I have demonstrated how useful these tools have been to find family members. And I thank you for being with me. And here's my contact information. And I believe that I can take a few questions.
Yes, if you have questions, either put them in the chat or raise your hand and we'll try to get you on. Unmute yourself as well. Are there any questions? I don't see any, so we will move on to Doug Cohen, and Doug will speak on researching Poland. Doug is a required CFO who has been researching his family for over 20 years. Doug has about 3,200 names in his genealogical database. He is also the treasurer of the International Association of Jewish Genealogical Societies, the umbrella organization of which JGS of Southwest Florida is a member. Doug, please begin.
Good afternoon, everybody. Some years ago, my Uncle Philip said to me, the small town in Poland where my parents grew up was destroyed by the Nazis during the war. I said to him, no, it wasn't. He said, yes, it was. I said, no, Phil, it was not. He said, yes, it was. I said, Phil, it was not destroyed. It's still there. He said, no, it isn't. I didn't think I was getting very far with him. So I tried another approach. I said, Phil, what made you say such a thing? He said, your aunt and I went to Warsaw and we visited the Jewish Community Center there, which I think he means the Jewish Historical Institute. And I asked them to look up the town, thinking perhaps I would go there while I was in Poland. They had no record of it. It must have been destroyed. I said to him, Uncle, haven't you ever heard of the man who was born in Russia, raised his children in the Soviet Union, married in the Soviet Union, raised his children in Poland, and now lives in the independent country of Ukraine, but he's been in the same house his whole life? The borders kept moving. The town is now in Ukraine. Of course, the Polish people didn't know much about it. The map of Europe changed continuously. And now if I can share my screen. It's not doing it. Wait a second. Okay, now let's try sharing the screen. The map of Europe changed continually. Poland in the 16th century was the largest country in Europe, but it became very weak. It was the major uprising of the Ukrainians in the mid-1600s led to a weakening of the state, and people started taking bites out of it. In 1772, the three great empires, the Austro-Hungarian, the Prussian, and the Russian empires, each took a bite out of Poland. And these big chunks went to other countries, and now Poland was much smaller. In 1793, there were two more bites, and in 1795, they said, you know, there's so little left, we might as well take the whole thing. And Poland ceased to exist as a country in 1795. A large piece of it was taken by Russia. And after the Napoleonic Wars in 1815, the European countries met at the Congress of Vienna and divided up the continent of Europe. They did a good job. It stayed that way for about 100 years till the beginning of World War I. But when Russia took that big chunk of Poland, along with it came a lot of Jews. There had never been Jews in Russia. Jews were not allowed into Russia. So now Catherine the Great had this big Jewish population, and she really didn't know quite what to do with it. What she did was to draw a line, which she called a pale. A pale is a line, it's a border. And this created the Pale of Settlement. Jews were permitted to live west of the pale, west of the line, in the pale, which is where they'd always lived because it used to be Poland. They were not permitted to live east of the line, where they had never lived. And we will take a look now at the Pale of Settlement. Oops. There we go. There's the Pale of Settlement. And this area was all under the administration of Russia. So if you want to know, if you want to look for your family, you have to know where they came from. And these provinces were known as gubernias. Now, there was a big rebellion in 1831. The Poles rose up against the Russians, and the Russians absolutely clamped down on them. But then they tried again in 1862 or 1863. And again, the Russians thoroughly put down this uprising. But at that point, Tsar Alexander II said, there will be no more Poland, no more Polish. And the records, which had been kept in Polish up to that time, are now kept in Russian, an old Russian script, which is another challenge in finding records. But let's look together at the, we're going to talk about two principal sources of records. And they are Jewish Gen and Jewish Records Indexing Poland. So let's go to Jewish Gen. Shared screen. We should have Jewish Gen here. There. This is jewishgen.org. And if we're looking for records for our, we need to know the ancestral town. And we can discover the ancestral town with the Jewish Communities database. We can look with various spellings, various names, Yiddish name, the English name. If you can usually find it through the Jewish Gen Communities database or through such publications as Where Once We Walked. And we're going to look here for Sherpitz in Poland. We could do it phonetically. We could give it the modern country, the interwar country. We're just going to look by the modern country here and start the search. And here we have the town of Sherpitz, Poland. We click on it. We learn where it is, the various names that it has. And we also learn that there are 216 entries in the Jewish Gen Family Finder for Sherpitz. Family Finder is a great tool. Here are people who are looking for various names in Sherpitz. So look here, do you see your name? Maybe you're going to find somebody else who is looking for the same name that you are. Another town we can look for. We can look in the Jewish community tree. And here we have various countries and various names. Interwar Poland. Now again, we're looking here by Gdynia. And district of Lutsk. And son of a gun, there is Olica, another of my ancestral towns. You could then search the database for names or find or other information. Another major source, we're gonna leave Jewish Gen for the moment. Yeah, we're going to go. Share. JRI Poland, jri-poland.org is another very important source for finding records in your town. JRI Poland has been indexing genealogical records for close to 30 years. We're going to look for a town and see what records we can find. Your town. We're going to look for Sherpitz. And we're going to look for records. There are 9,800 records for Sherpitz. You do have to have a membership, but it's free. So here we are looking at records from Sherpitz under the name Blumen, my great-grandfather's name. And here are a whole lot of documents. These are links. There are links to documents. Sometimes you only get the index number, and you have to look in family search records or write to the town, to the archive, but you can get all of these documents. We've gone through it kind of quickly, but there's some demonstration of these two very important websites for researching in Poland. And again, I would take questions, be happy to take questions.
Okay, thank you, Doug. Are there any questions, comments, or anything in chat, or anyone who wants to raise their hand? Okay, thank you, Doug. And we will move on to Barry. Barry Halpern will speak on researching Lithuania. Barry first began researching his family's genealogy when he retired about 14 years ago. With his 4 Litvak grandparents and his father born in Lithuania, he became heavily involved with Litvak Special Interest Group. He has served on Litvak SIG's board for many years and also currently runs the Litvak SIG website. He has also been on the board of the JGS of Colorado and produced their newsletter for 10 years. Barry and his wife Ellie live full-time in Sarasota, but both were born and raised in the Boston area. Their 3 children and 4 grandchildren all live in Boulder, Colorado. Barry.
Thank you. And hello, everybody, and thanks for joining us today. I am sorry we could not do this in person. It would have been nice, but perhaps in a year we'll be able to do it. What strikes me as I'm listening to the first 2 presentations, there's so much commonality from one to the next, particularly with Poland and JRI Poland and JewishGen.org. We've got a lot of overlap, and there are lessons to learn by listening to what other groups are doing, and it can help your research. If you give me a second, I'm going to share my screen. There we go. I will say that in the attachment, or I'm sorry, the handout that Kim distributed just before the meeting, these are all my slides. I'm not going to cover all of them, so you'll get what I show here, and you'll get a little bit more. If you have any questions afterwards, there's my email address, barry.halpern@gmail, and I'm happy to try to help you with anything related to the Litvak area. So what do we mean by Litvak? It was helpful it was helpful that Doug showed the map of the Palis settlement. One of the things that you could see from that is that what was considered Lithuania through all this time kept growing and shrinking over the years, with borders shifting and all that. But the traditional consideration of calling yourself a Litvak, the geographic area that those folks came from includes what is now Lithuania, Latvia, Northeast Poland, and Belarus. And it's important to keep that in mind, because your search for the records may not just be in your what you think of as your particular ancestral home. This is a map that David Katz prepared a bunch of years ago. And this is the land of the Litvaks. And if you look at the names, is my mouse, there's Vilna there. So here, this is what is current Lithuania, but here's Minsk, Mogilov, and here's Riga up here, Latvia today. But the point is, this whole area isn't today's Lithuania, but over some period of time, it was part of Lithuania, and your records may not be where you think they are. As was mentioned in the introduction, I've been involved with Litvak SIG for quite a few years. And Litvak SIG is the entity, the organization that has produced close to 2.5 million archival records that have been secured from the archives in Lithuania, mostly, translated, scanned, translated, and digitized. So where do you start if you're a Litvak and you want to try to find out something about your family history? And the general beginner's advice is start with yourself and work backwards to your parents, grandparents, and so forth. Don't try to jump back 150, 200 years and work your way forward. You'll inevitably run into troubles. But once you know you're a Litvak, and once you are able to start tracing your ancestry back, then you'll find that the Litvak SIG website can be very helpful in getting you additional information. Our primary end product is the All Lithuanian Database, or ALD. And here's the link. And we have the data of more than 2 million, close to 2.5 million records. All those records are housed on a server that is run by Jewish Gen, but it is separate from Jewish Gen. But you can search the ALD for free. You don't have to be a member with Litvox Sig. You don't even need to have an account with Litvox Sig. But you can search the ALD for free. As we obtain and produce new records, new translations, they're not available on the ALD until 18 months after we are able to make them available to our donors. This is a screen capture of part of the Litvox Sig homepage. You can pretty much search anything in our search box here. We reference ourselves as what we consider ourselves as to be the primary research for Lithuanian Jewish genealogy. As I mentioned, many of what are considered Litvak shtetls are now in Belarus and other areas. We have many of those records, and we have worked together with the Belarus Special Interest Group, now considered, I think, the Belarus Research Group under Jewish Gen's umbrella. This is another screen capture from the website. The main links are at the top. These are our each of our districts. We have 14 districts. Our data is split by these generally geographic and administrative areas. Each of these groups, and this is they're the 19th century administrative districts, and this is a map of those. You might find that useful if you look at the handout. Sorry, I want to go back. Each of these groups has a coordinator who is a volunteer through Litvox Sig. Earlier, before we got started, Joanne Goldwater was asking about her ancestral town and where the records and how can she find her surnames. And it might be helpful to contact the district coordinator for the relevant group to do that, because they know what's in their records, they know what they have, they know what they don't have. Our website also has information about the various archives. This is the Central Archives, and this is a link to the State Historical Archives. Each archival entity will have different types of records. I actually, part of the Litvox Sig board a number of years ago visited Lithuania. We visited the archivists. Even though an individual here or there has been to the archives previously, it was good for all of us to meet the people that we deal with and see how things work there. To search the All Lithuania database, you simply click on the link at the top of our webpage, and you'll get a search form that looks like something you've seen on other websites. We've got a variety of inputs, surnames, towns, and that sort of thing. General advice is to start your searches broad and narrow it down. If you start very broad, such as a town name, and you wind up getting 2,000 results, you might want to try to narrow down the search by using a given name. The search results look, again, something familiar. If you use Jewish Gen search engines, it'll give you a list of results, and you can click on those and get to the records. Jewish Gen also has a database which is called the Jewish Gen Lithuania database. So you've got the All Lithuania database, which is housed on Jewish Gen, but is separate from the Jewish Gen Lithuania database. What's the difference? The Jewish Gen database will give you search results for everything in the ALD. They will also give you Family Finder search results, they will give you Jober, the Jewish worldwide burial database results. But the search engines are both different. Litvak SIG search engine gives you a little bit more flexibility. Jewish Gen is a little bit more limited. This is pretty much a repeat of what I had said previously. Use Merriam-Weiner's Roots to Roots Foundation. They have, I'm going to skip ahead. They have good descriptions of what kinds of records, dates, and so forth that are contained in the revision list that are relevant to Lithuania. And I'm gonna stop there and see if there are any questions. And again, if you find anything in the handout that sparks a question, feel free to write to me.
Okay, thank you, Barry. If there are questions for Barry, please go ahead and unmute because I'm missing some of these in chat. Go ahead and unmute and ask your question.
I have a question.
Identify yourself, please.
Oh, sorry, Joel Weinstein. My mother's side of the family is from Riga. We know that very well, and we actually have a surname. I'm a novice at this. I was surprised and gave me some hope to see that Riga was actually in the Litvak database. Would you advise me to search extensively there, or in your experience, are there better sources for Riga, Latvia information?
I would generally start with Latvia's SIG and see what they
Oh,
have.
I didn't know there was one. Okay.
There is one. I have to admit, I'm not that familiar with the data and the records that they have. I know we have something, but if you and sorry, I don't have the answer off the top of my head. If you look at the Litvak SIG website, search for Riga and get the name of the person who is the coordinator for the district that encompasses those records.
Right.
Get in touch with that person. If you have trouble finding that, write to me afterwards and I'll direct you in the right way.
Sounds good. Thanks very much.
Okay, other questions for Barry Halpern before I jump back to Doug for a minute?
I have a question. Is it better to search individual databases for these Litvak SIG, etc., versus the universal search through Jewish Gen? Are there advantages and disadvantages to being more specific than more general?
I think there's two approaches. What I tell people and what I do myself, if I'm searching a new person, I'd use the All Lithuania database first. It's free, it's easy to use, it gives you results that you're used to seeing. And I'd start with that, number one, and then I see if I can lead myself to some records. The other thing I would do, and Doug Cohen referred to it in his presentation, is you go to the Family Finder, you find other people on Jewish Gen who are searching the same surname as you, and you see if you get any hits that way, and you get in touch with those folks to see if somebody's already found your ancestors. So I say multiple tracks.
Okay, Barry Clark, if you're still there, would you please go ahead and unmute yourself? You had a question for Doug Cohen that I missed, and why don't you go ahead and ask that?
He's answered it in the chat. I just wondered what people's experiences were with whether there is a lot of overlap between JRI Poland and Jewish Gen, or whether there's a lot of differences that we can find if we go to both and enter the same information, the town and the family name. I'm really puzzled about how much time to spend on each of those.
Well, I wrote back in the chat. I don't know what the overlap is, but
Does anybody know, experience-wise? No.
I start with JRI Poland just because I've been using it more.
Right,
You're
right.
really going to have to look at both. If you don't find what you want in one place, you're going to have to look in the other.
Yeah, yeah. I just wondered if anybody knew whether there was a lot of overlap or just a small amount. Yeah. Guess not. Okay.
Okay, I see a question here from someone about what does gubernia mean? Doug, can you, and actually I'll ask either one, Doug or Barry, to jump in with an answer to that.
Gubernia means province. It's a province, a section of the Russian Empire.
Okay, Dean Kudich had a question for Barry. Do the databases contain non-Jewish family records? His family was from Svenskna, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, Lithuania.
In the case of Litvak Sig, we're striving to only put on their Jewish records to the extent. Generally, you can tell, which records are from Jews and which records aren't. I guess there would be an occasional inaccurate one, but they're supposed to be all Jewish records.
Okay.
Okay, other questions? If you want, jump in and unmute yourself and identify yourself and ask your question.
I have a question.
Go ahead, identify yourself, please.
Alan Geller.
Go ahead.
Okay. My family is from Grodno, Ubirna. I noticed it was at the bottom of the map, and I'd like to know if this was part of the Lithuanian, part of Lithuania, because I was told at one point they were in Belarus, and it was part of Poland. I mean, depending, who was in charge at the time, but are they considered? They're all considered Litvaks, the people from Grodno.
It's again, it would depend on the specific family and surname, but it's entirely possible that we would have those records in Litvak Sig. Have you tried looking at doing a search on the ALD?
No, I have not.
It might be worth, as a first step,
Okay.
to see if you come up with anything.
Okay, but they're considered Litvaks, right?
Correct.
And yeah, Grodno. Berna. Okay, thank you.
Okay, let's move on to Mike Schwartz. Mike will speak on researching Ukraine and Galicia. Mike is a retired engineer and executive in the telecommunications industry, where he gained experience at the podium by giving technical talks and briefings around the world. He has been pursuing his family history for over 14 years, has traced his family both in the US and Eastern Europe. He has given presentations about his research at the Morris Area Genealogical Society in New Jersey, the Jewish Genealogical Society of Northern New Jersey, and here at the JGS of Southwest Florida. He is an active member of these organizations. He's also spoken at numerous other genealogical societies and clubs in New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and Florida. His focus is on Austria-Hungary province of Galicia and on Russian Ukraine, hence the topic of today's presentation. Mike, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Howard. Hopefully everybody's hearing me. I'm going to go right to my presentation and try and share it and work from that. So bear with me for a moment as we try and share. I'm not seeing it. I must have done something wrong here.
Mike, it has to be on your screen before you can share it.
Well, I thought it was. Hang on a second. Yeah, it's there.
Click on it.
There you go.
Oh, we're good now?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, all I got to do is get this into show mode. Okay. You see the title screen now, I hope?
Yep.
Okay, good. So we'll move on from that. All right, so as Howard said, I've been researching family members in this area for some time. What you see on the screen is a map of essentially current day Ukraine, and superimposed on it are photos of some of my ancestors and where they came from in Ukraine. Although some of them were not in Ukraine, and that's because of the way the borders moved. But starting from the left, that's my grandmother and my great-grandfather. They were Austrian and from Galicia. As we move to the right, I have another grandmother and another great-grandfather. They were from Russia. They said Kiev, but not really, as we'll talk about. And then we have some of my wife's family as well. Below them is her grandfather from Uman. Going to the right, her grandmother from Kremenchuk. And then down at the bottom from Odessa is her great-grandfather and her grandmother. So I've, found records and been somewhat successful in researching all of these people, as well as others from other parts, including Litvaks, by the way, Barry, from the Suwalki region. But we're not going to talk about that. You did a great job of talking about that region. But again, this is Ukraine as it appears today, with the exception on the bottom of the portion of Crimea that was just recently, a few years ago, annexed by Russia. And if we superimpose on that the area of Austria-Hungary's crown land of Galicia, you can see that a large concentration of Jews lived in that area, and a lot of them were in what is now Ukraine, some on what is now Poland. Although, as was pointed out earlier, much of this was at one point Poland, actually the Poland and Lithuanian Commonwealth. That was before the partitions at the end of the 18th century. Now, let's start with the Galicia portion. All right, and again, quite a few people have descendants from that area, Jews from that area. In 1910, and 1910 was after the huge migrations of the 1890s and 1900s to America and other places. But the census there showed 872,000 Jews, and it was 11% of the population. That's a decrease from what it had been previously. So that was a significant portion of the population. The official language in that area, because it was Austria-Hungary, was German. But because of the ethnicity of a lot of the people in the area, Polish and Ukrainian were also widely spoken. Yiddish, which was spoken by almost all the Jews, was not recognized as an official language. And so you won't find any official records in Yiddish, but you will find them in German, sometimes in Polish as well. Now, Austria-Hungary was, in Eastern Europe, one of the more liberal areas with regard to Jews. And Jews were largely free to own property, conduct business, although they were heavily taxed. But that means that there are records, property records and business records, which are civil records, that can be found. Jews also, as a compensation for the fact that they were free to do all these things, they had to serve, as other citizens did, in the Austrian army. There was a draft, and they were drafted at the age of 19 or 20 for 3 years of service, and then 10 years in the reserve. Now, the implication of that is there are military records that can be found. A very common one that increasingly has been made available on the web is for World War I's Verlustlisten. Verlustlisten means casualties, lost, is the simple translation, and it includes soldiers who were killed, wounded, or captured. So let's go through some of the examples. All right, birth and marriage and death records actually are in the Warsaw archives. One of the reasons for that is at the end of World War I, the area of Galicia became part of Poland. It's in a section of the Warsaw archives called, which the Warsaw archives are called Agad, and it's in Fond 300, which is basically the booklet or book. There are birth, marriage, and death records that are in the Old Galicia database, which is managed by Gesher Galicia, which is an organization that used to be part of Jewish Gen, but is split away from them. They have their own website. And JRI Poland, which you heard a lot about because of the overlaps. There are business records, both found in Gesher Galicia's database and in Jewish Gen's databases, and military records. And although they're available in a couple of places, the place that I go to for it is totally unassociated with any of these other Jewish organizations. It's called GenTeam. And genteam.at or genteam.eu actually is a group of volunteer genealogists centered in Vienna that deal with Austrian records, and Austrian military records are part of it, and the Verlustlisten are being indexed by that group. They've got over 1 million entries already because there were over 1 million casualties of the Austrian-Hungarian armies. And so it's a very useful place to go to look for things. There are both Jews and non-Jews in that one. So let me give you an example of some of the kinds of records you can find. From Jewish Gen, one of the things you can find is the Galicia 1891 business directory. Remember, Jews were in businesses. And it gives you information like this: the names, the town, the occupation, and it even translates it for you in English. So you see someone who was in the business of fashions and clothes, in the business of drapery, linen, and underwear, interesting combination, grocery, and many, many others. This, of course, it's listed alphabetically. I just cut off the first three so you get an idea of the kinds of information you can find. This is from Jewish Gen. I talked about military records. Well, here's an example. This is my grandfather. I've spoken about him in presentations I've made to this group. You might remember, those of you who've seen it. But his name was Kiva Schwartz. He came to America and became Kiva Schwartz with a T in there between the R and the Z. I discovered when I was about 15 that he had been a soldier and had been captured. This is the actual record that was published in January of 1916 in one of the books of the Verlustlisten. And it translates that he was in the reserve infantry. By the way, that's because he had been drafted earlier as a younger man, but was called up because he was still in the reserve, called up in 1914 at the time of the mobilization. He was in the KKLIR, that's the Royal Landeswehr Regiment, number 34, 8th Company, and was recruited from Rawaruska in Galicia. Rawaruska was a big market town, a central town in the district where he lived. He was born in Niemerov, which I knew from other information, and born in 1882. And he was a Kriegsgefangen, a war prisoner in Khabarovsk in Russia, in Siberia. And from this information, I have been able to find other websites that detail the history of the Austrian army in World War I. I've been able to trace where Regiment 34 fought and where they lost a lot of people to capture by the Russians. They fought on the Eastern Front. So this can be a trigger to lots of good information. Now, let's go to the area of Russia and Ukraine for a moment. And the first thing I would like to say, and this kind of repeats what you've seen earlier, is don't confuse the Gubernian name with the town of origin name. And I say this because in most of the cases in my own family research, when I look at census, or even better, when I look at ship manifest records for those who came here, and they list where did you come from, they list the name of the gubernia, not the name of the town. Sometimes you can find that if you go further onto page 2 of a ship manifest and you see where were you born, they may actually list the name of the town. But the first piece of information they'll list is either Russia or Kiev or Cherkasy. All right. Someone who says they are from Kiev may not be from Kiev, but from Kiev gubernia. And so you really have to pay attention to where they actually came from in order to get the kinds of records that some of the other speakers have talked about. Now, the story for Jews in the Ukraine, in the Russian Empire, was very different from what we talked about in Austria-Hungary and Galicia. Jews lived in Ukraine territory for a long, long time, since the 11th century, documented in the Kiev region. In Jews that were in Ukraine proper, that is the Russian part of it, during the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, were one of the largest groups. So, I mean, they have a long, long history in that region. And that region became the Pale of Settlement, as was pointed out. Under Tsar Alexander III, Jews had very limited rights. Much of this was in reaction to the assassination of his father, that was Nicholas I, I believe. I'm sorry?
Alexander the Second.
Yeah, Alexander II. Sorry. Thank you. Thank you. And the Jews were blamed for that in propaganda. And so they passed very restrictive laws, which stayed in place until about 1894. Now, again, in Odessa, in the southern part of Ukraine, by 1897, that was really a big Jewish enclave. Jews were estimated to account for some 37% of the population. Now, after World War I, for a short period of time, Ukraine became an independent republic, and Jews were granted a lot more rights. In fact, they participated in the government. They were part of the establishment. And then, of course, the Bolsheviks took over, and it became part of the Soviet Union. And so in the Soviet era, not so much. So what does all this mean for research? Well, the first and the most important thing to note is official records are hard to find. The Soviets controlled a lot of those records after 1921, and the Soviets didn't let much of that go public. The second issue is that when you can get those records, they're in Russian or Ukrainian and in the Cyrillic alphabet. So you've got to be able to, in order to even recognize a name, you've got to be able to read, at least phonetically read, in the Cyrillic alphabet. I'm fortunate that I can do that because I took 2 years of Russian in high school. And so I sort of learned how to do that, but I don't read, I won't say I read or speak Russian. Now, catalogs of all metric books in the fonds, that's the books of the State Archives of Ukraine, can be downloaded, and there's a link. The problem, of course, is that they're in Ukrainian. There are chapters focused solely on Jews, and they start with, and that's the Ukrainian word, I would pronounce that as Yudam. I could be off on that a little bit, but that's my phonetics of reading Cyrillic anyway.
Judaism.
Okay, thank you, thank you. Yeah, the symbol, the first letter that looks like an I is not in a Russian letter. It doesn't exist in Russian, so I guess that's an I or a J sound. So that's why. Thank you. Jewish Jane's Ukraine SIG can help. They have some records that are now transliterated into, Latin letters. And then there's Alex Krakowski. Alex Krakowski, who I certainly don't know personally, but I know a lot about him. Alex is a genealogist, a Ukrainian genealogist who is based in the town of Lvov, which was Austria-Hungary, used to be Lemberg. But he is scanning Ukraine archive records and he's posting them online. He has actually sued the Ukrainian government under their version of the Freedom of Information Act that we have here in the US. They have a version of it, I guess, that has allowed him to access those records, which shows you the difficulty in getting access to these records. And he's posting them online. The problem is it's in Ukrainian. You can find his stuff by just Googling Alex Krakowski and you'll get to his website and go from there. But good luck, because you got to read Ukrainian. But it's not all hopeless. There are some records on more conventional sites that you can find. Here's an example of two of my relatives from Jewish Gen. All right, Jewish Gen happens to have records of the Kiev gubernia Duma voters list. Now, in 1907, the Tsar was under political pressure and was required by that pressure to form a legislature called the Duma. And people could vote for their legislatures. Only people who owned property. But by 1907, some Jews owned property. And one of them was my great-grandfather, Max Malo. That was his name here in the US. In Russia, he was Murtko Malagolovka. And he owned property in the town of Lysyanka, right? Which by that time was no longer in the Kiev gubernia, but in the district of Svenogorka, because they changed the borders around. But on his arrival records, which I have his ship manifest, it says he came from Kiev. So that's a little misleading because he actually was an innkeeper in Lysyanka, which is about 80 miles from Kiev. Also, in that same database, right, is Tevye Fon. My wife's maiden name is Fon. They spell it here in the US Phon, and that's a transliteration because the Russian letter for an F sound is like the Greek phi. So they always joke that their name was lengthened when they came to America, not shortened as many names were otherwise. But the interesting thing here is that this record included Tevye's patronymic, which is essentially Tevye's father's name. So from that, we learn not only about my wife's great-grandfather, who we know what his name was because her brother is named after him. His name is Tom, but also that her great-great-grandfather is Ikelef. So you can find some records, and he owned property in the center of the city of Uman. We know that family from Tevye's son, which is my wife's grandfather, who came here to the US, they were confectioners. And so we believe that the property he owned might have been a candy making factory in Uman. We have not been able to verify that yet. Now you can also, if you search hard enough through old boxes and shoe boxes, you might find some records from Russia in family archives. So here's a record which gives some interesting information actually of my wife's grandmother, her father's mother, in Russian. And this is a document issued by the Rabbinic Council of Odessa. She had always said, because she was here in the US, that she came from Odessa. And it was issued the birth certification for Sura Bindera, known here as Sonia Binder before she married Charles Fon. and born to Chai Rivka. We also knew of her mother, my wife's great grandmother, Rivka, because she lived with them in Brooklyn for a while before she died. But the interesting thing is that Sonia, or she was known, Bubby Sonia, was born in the city of Brest-Litovsk, which is now in Belarus. And that tells you a little bit about how much Jews could move and resettle within the Russian Empire and within the Pale, and they did. So this is a list of some possible and useful databases for Ukraine. All of this will be made available through Kim on the Jewish Gen, on the Southwest Florida website. And these are databases, some of which I've used, some of which are very difficult to use. For example, the Kiev Gubernia Revision List portal, the third one down, is a revision list is a census, and it has to be searched in Cyrillic. Same with the fourth one, then Zhytomyr, which is another area of Ukraine. Those metric books are available, but again, in Cyrillic. So good luck. And with that, I'll take any questions you might have.
Thank you, Mike. Are there any questions for Mike? Go ahead and unmute yourself and identify yourself and ask.
Yeah, I'd like to just make a comment. And that
Yeah.
was, I probably should have said it in my presentation. We talked about the partitions of Poland. That portion of Poland, which went to the Austro-Hungarian Empire, became Galicia. That's what Galicia was. It was the province. It was the that portion of Poland which became Austro-Hungarian.
Okay, thank you, Doug, and thank you, Mike. Our next presenter
Tim
is
had something to say.
I'm sorry?
No.
Yefim had his
No,
hand up.
I agree. Yeah.
Okay. The next presenter is Yefim Kogan, and he will be speaking on researching Bessarabia, Moldova. Yefim was born in Kishinev, Moldova. After he emigrated from the USSR in 1989, he did extensive genealogical and historical research. In 2012, he received a Master of Jewish Liberal Studies degree at Hebrew College, Boston, with focus in Jewish cultural history. Yefim was active in the Jewish Genealogical Society of Greater Boston. He started a new Bessarabia Special Interest Group, now Research Division at jewishgen.org, and has presented at Jewish genealogical conferences on history, culture, and genealogy of Jews in Bessarabia, Moldova. Yefim, go ahead.
Hi, everybody. Thanks, Howard. First, actually, I have a comment for Mike. You mentioned that some relative was in prison in Khabarovsk, right? Khabarovsk is far, far away to the east, almost to the sea, which goes to Japan. But
Yes.
But what I encountered that many prisoners were sent to Siberia, even far east, and there are Jewish cemeteries I found in town of Irkutsk, where it says that it is a prisoner, it's an Austrian citizen, prisoned, etc., etc. But you can try to find those cemeteries in those places if you have.
Well, fortunately, my grandfather made it back to Galicia.
Oh, perfect.
And then
perfect.
to America. I mean, I knew my grandfather.
Perfect. I wasn't sure about this. Okay.
Yes, but
okay.
but interestingly, I tried to do some research about the prison camp in Khabarovsk, and I actually found photos of Jewish prisoners in the camp, celebrating Passover.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Let's talk about Bessarabia, Moldova. I want right away to share my my screen. Okay. And you can see my screen, right?
Yes.
Okay. First, I want to give you a little geography and history information, because there are some confusion. What is Bessarabia? What is Moldova? Etc. And then let's take a look on this map, little map. Now, first of all, Bessarabia and Moldova are completely two different places. Yeah, there are some intersection, but it's a different historical regions. Now, Bessarabia is a historical region. It's a province, gubernia of the Russian Empire. Okay, and it came about in 1812, when the Russian Empire took part of Moldova Principality, okay, which was under Turkish control. But in any case, on this map, the Bessarabia region is in yellow and purple. This is Bessarabia. Now, two which is in purple are now in Ukraine, in current Ukraine, and yellow is a Moldova Republic, okay, or Republic of Moldova. Now, then there is this small green piece of land, and that used to be, it's not in Bessarabia, but it's part of Moldova and Transnistria. Transnistria, it's a self-declared region, country actually, which nobody recognized except I think Russia. In any case, this green used to be part of Podolia gubernia and Kherson gubernia, okay? But now, as I said, it's a separate entity, and there is a border, and there are Russian peacekeepers between those two places, because it was a war. Now, then the question is, what is Moldova and what is Moldavia? And the people are confused. I saw even at the Jewish Gen. First of all, those two terms are the same. The difference is that Moldova is in Romanian and Moldovan languages, okay? Romanian language, I would say. And Moldavia was introduced in English and in the Russian language, okay? But territorial, it's the same thing. Now, I want to show you the next slide. Again, before 1812, Moldavian Principality was under Turkish control. And it was not only what is here, Bessarabia, but also which is now part of Romania, okay? Even bigger part was here, now it's part of Romania. What it means that you can see, we have this Moldova Republic now, it's a country, but also there is a Moldova region in Romania. And be aware of this. Yassi, the major town of that Moldova is Yassi or Yash in Yiddish. Now, then from 1812 to 1917, Bessarabia gubernia was under Russian Empire, but part of Moldavian Principality remained as a separate entity under Turks. And only in 1870, that part of Moldova Principality was joined with Wallachia Principality and created Romania. Romania was not on the map until 1870s. Now, 1918 to 1940, 17 was the Russian Revolution, and Romania took over that piece of land, which is Bessarabia. In 1940, Soviets came back and took that land for 1 year until the World War. Hitler and Romanian fascists occupied that land, and from that is during the World War II. It was a Romanian kingdom. Now, in here, from 41 and 44 to 91, it was Soviet Union. And from 91, it's independent Republic of Moldova. Now, what I want to also to tell you, at the All Russia census in 1897, Bessarabia had 250,000 Jews. Okay, and Kishinev, which is a capital of that land, actually, this is where I was born, had 50,000 Jews. It's one of the largest, actually, I think number 6 or 7 in Eastern and Central Europe, after several towns like Odessa, Warsaw, Lodz, and maybe a few more. Now, what we have in Jewish record, Jewish genealogy for Bessarabia, I think we have quite a lot. We have among the vital records 170,000, and its marriages, its birth records, and then the revision list, which is very, very important. And we have revision lists starting from 1824 for some towns, not for all towns. We have a 250,000 of those. And then we have Duma, businesses, different kinds, directories. Then I think somebody talked about this database, Russian Jewish fallen soldiers in World War I. But we translated part for Bessarabia gubernia and put it online. And then there are some other, and actually this is very important, burial records. I personally think that this is an urgent matter to index and photograph all the tombstones which are still standing, because they are disappearing. This is my priority as a head of Bessarabia Research Group now. This is the high priority, and we are doing our best to complete that project. Now, a couple of things I want to tell. I think the prior, I think Ukrainian person told about Brest-Litovsk, that somebody was born in Brest-Litovsk. But I saw that record, it's in Russian. It doesn't say that. And I want to make a point, which is not just for Bessarabia, but for Ukraine, for any other. There are two basically towns a Jew belonged to. One town where he lived, okay, and the other town where he was registered in one of the societies. And societies are merchants, farmer or colonists, and the other society we are translating as middle class is Mishani in Russian. It's basically it's a middle class, it's 90% of all Jews. Now, what it says in that record, where I saw this Brest-Litovsk, that father was a Mishanin, Brest-Litovsky Mishanin. That means that he was registered in Brest-Litovsk, but doesn't mean he lived there or he was born there. Only he was registered there. Okay. Now, not all towns had these societies, and people could live in one place and register it in completely different place. And I think this is important to, very important to understand. And this is a particular case, what I saw. Yeah, I think Rivka, you said was born in Brest-Litovsk. No, her father was registered in Brest-Litovsk. Okay, let's continue here. What I also did, and I think this might help, I put a lot of resources, some from Georgia and others from other places. Interesting articles on that. Yeah, this Jewish heritage sites and monuments in Moldova and Ukraine I have here, and I think this is a tremendous of importance. It was done by a U.S. Committee for the Preservation of America's Heritage Abroad. And then who is interested in history, and I believe that genealogy, you cannot do genealogy without knowing history. And here were a couple of interesting articles on that. And then we just talked about different states or categories of Jews, like I said, Mishani, etc. And there is an article about this, and you can read it. And then here is a little bit more, and surnames might be of interest. What is a specific, because this is a specific area. It's not like old Russia. It's not Litvaks. No. It's definitely, sometimes the Jews were named like Bessarabian Jews or something like this. Okay, and then maps. If interested about maps, here's a site. Okay, here's my email address. I would like questions, but if you have after that, I would be glad to answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Yefim. Are there questions specifically for Yefim? And then we'll take some general questions right after that.
This is Mike Schwartz again.
Yes.
Yefim, thank you for that clarification. It really helps to have a native Russian language reader, because I was struggling with that, but that's how I interpreted it. But the question is, so if her father was registered in Brest-Litovsk, how does that happen that he's in Odessa? Does that mean that he was born in Brest-Litovsk, or?
No.
Because they're so far apart.
Yeah, I know. But be aware, Jews moved a lot. And here are a few reasons why they did this. First, to marry somebody, okay? And we have in Bessarabia marriage records Jews from Vilna, Jews from all kinds, from Poland, okay? Now, the second reason for job, to get a job, because sometimes this shtetl, they didn't have enough jobs that people can take. And Jews moved really a lot.
Yeah, I understand that, and that's actually what I was trying to point out there. But I'm trying to understand if it was Sonia, actually was the birth record, it was for Sonia Osura, but her father registered in Brest-Litovsk.
Yeah.
So at some point, he or his family was from Brest-Litovsk, is what I'm hearing from you.
Maybe or maybe not, because they may live some places, maybe like 20 miles of Brest-Litovsk.
But that's the center of the where it's registered. I understand, but he's certainly from that region originally.
It's possible, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Fine. Okay, and thank you again.
My name is Lois Goldman. Nice to meet you. I would like to reference my grandparents, who were Elias Lebovich Lubowitz, and they were from Moldova, and also had connections to Scolini and the area in Romania, Lassi, and I can't find anything about them or their children. No birth dates were registered, no marriage dates were registered. They were born in 1857. They immigrated to the United States in 1886 to Alliance, New Jersey, which was a Jewish farming community. And then they took up residence in Philadelphia in 1906.
Okay, well, I think a good chance that you can find revision lists,
Okay.
including for Sculiane. I think we already have some, but if you didn't find them, they're not there yet. You checked Jewish Gen, correct?
Yes.
Sculiane was a very, very large town. But the problem with Sculiane that it was divided by a river Prut in two parts. One part was in Romania, current Romania. Another part was in Bessarabia, Russia. That's why possibly if Yase is there, then there is a possibility that they are not from Bessarabia region, but from Romania, Sculiane. Okay.
Right. That's where his wife, Anna Rose. But Elias clearly always defines himself as being in Kishinev.
Oh, Kishinev. Okay. Also, I would suggest look for this name for marriages and stuff in other towns close by, like Sculiane. It might be there is a town a large town, Belce, was a center of that uyezd. Okay.
How do you spell that?
Belce, you know, Statele Bells. There is a song, and this is that town. Well, you can spell Beltz, for example. It doesn't really matter spelling. You can search for it. Or Kishinev, even Kishinev, because Jews, in many cases, moved to marry in other larger places, especially who were rich and some means. Yeah.
Yes, I couldn't find even where their children were registered. You would think that their births, would have been registered in 1879, but no, never could find anything on them either.
For Belce, we do have actually many records, and we are still working, still in progress. And the Belce sometimes have births from close by Städtlach or close by towns like Skuljana. It was a small town.
Right. How about Falestri?
Faleshte, yes, it's also in the same district of Belce.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was actually there, a couple years ago, and I tried to get information. I went to the Chabad, and they have no connection. They're not interested.
They don't have anything. The only information you can find with us at Jewish Gen or at Moldova Archive in Kishinev.
Okay. All right. I'd like to have another conversation with you at the point in time, if that's possible.
Sure. Yeah, please give me a call and we can schedule.
I will. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye.
Okay, other questions for Yefim or general questions? Okay. Thank you all for attending. Kim, do you have anything else you wish to add?
I just wanted to ask Jim a question. When the meeting is over, can some of the people still stay on to chat with each other?
Yeah, I'll be around.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Let me also mention, gosh, now I'm trying to remember who it was. I think it was Mike who said, Mike, was it your relative was from Brest-Litovsk?
Well, yes, and of course, it was just clarified
Yeah.
which relative it probably
From
was.
the area.
But yes.
My maternal grandmother also, so we should chat about that.
Yeah, well, now it appears that, and this is my wife's relative actually, is that it's probably her great grandfather who was likely from that area, not her. I had misread the birth record to assume that she was born there.
Understood. We'll chat. I think Kim wants to wrap up, so.
Okay, thank you all very much and see you on February 20th.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. So Kim,
Yes?
I sent you a PDF copy